Hello, Sandra. Good morning. Good evening,
Good evening and good morning to all of you.
Sandra. Hi.
Wouldn't take this person because she's too long out of.
Fernanda, why don't we wait for 1 or 2 minutes, few minutes?
Okay for me.
Hello, Fernanda. Could you please share your screen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. And let's begin if possible. Thank you.
You let me know when we start.
Yes, please. Please go
Yeah.
ahead.
Fantastic. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is a global course. So I thank everyone for joining us for this class today. Special thanks to those who woke up extra early and the ones that are staying up late with us here tonight. And welcome to the 2025th edition of the Future of Capitalism program. And as we all know, human history is facing a very interesting critical time right now. And because of that, we are here together to explore new roles and responsibilities of business enterprise and leaders as such of each one of you here in realizing a more just, inclusive, and sustainable future for all of us. So with this main question in mind, the point that remains here is, where are we going? What are the challenges? What are the challenges facing business enterprise and leaders at this critical time change in the capitalism? So welcome to all of you. My name is Fernanda Corsi. I am the Executive Director of the Institute for Sustainability Leadership at IESE. And today, this edition of the program, I'm going to be your MC, replacing our friend Junichi Kagawa. And I hope that I can perform as well as he's been performing on the previous editions. Let's go very quickly through the house rules. Please, if you still did not identify yourself, as you can see on my screen, I kindly ask you to do it. So first your affiliation, and then your first and last name, as you can see. If you're a guest, please as well, guest, underline your full name. And a very important house rules here. Please keep your micro on mute and always turn on your camera. It's a much better participation experience if you're all with your cameras turned on and you can see our faces. Continue as well, just to remind you about the certificate of completion. We will be issuing together with the Shizenkan the 4 credits, the European Credit Transfer Accumulation Systems, as you know, and to be able to be entitled for that certificate, you need to attend at least 8 of our 11 sessions. And as well, if you'd like to receive a COC, you must register your attendance on a Google form that we will be sharing near to the end of each session. So if you have any questions as well, you can write us regarding those topics. Following my introduction, we will have a 2-hour sessions with our speakers today that I will introduce to you shortly soon. And just as a brief history of our Future of Capitalism course, it was founded by IESE Business School and Shizenkan University back in 2021, together with the Institute of Leadership Management and the Fundação Getúlio Vargas in Brazil. And to be able to amplify this ecosystem and scale all this conversation around the new forms of capitalism, we ended up opening the participations to other schools. We are now approximately to 20 schools all over the world, as you're affiliated to each one of them, to one of them at least, for this edition. And here you have the school representatives of each one of these schools, and having a new Sajdev as the founder and CEO of one of our main partners, the School of Inspired Leadership, and Edson Kondo as well, the dean as the Public Policy and Government of Fundação Getúlio Vargas in Brazil, as our main partners at the beginning. As well as the Future of Capitalism supporters, some of them as well from the beginning, such as Paul Pullman, John Elkington, and so many other thought leaders in the academic side and the business side as well, who will be sharing with us through how this edition. Here, a quick glance on the profile of the participants this year. This slide showing us per school. So you can see that you have like many participants attending this year from IESE, followed by School of Inspired Leadership, for example. And you can find your university there as well. And per region and country, and you can see that Asia and Oceania remain the main region. But we see that the future of capitalism is already being very well represented by the other regions as well right now. Let's see, I think more and more in the future. A special thanks to the team that is behind the success of this program. Derek Trang, thank you very much. Ana Globa and Nanji Wu, who's giving a super hand today as well. And I would like to mention Junichi Kagawa as well, who's the representative of IESE and who's been the MC, as I mentioned before, for the previous years. So thank you very much as well for your insights and support. Our main aspiration here is to really be able to create what we call this global platform and community of like-minded individuals and institutions to be a catalyst for a systemic change in global business education paradigm. So each one of you is a very important piece to be able to help us achieve this aspiration here. Here you can see Professor Tomonoda, the president and chair of the Shizenkan University in Japan, and Professor Franz Hilkamp from IESE Business School, our dean, and they were the initiators, the founders of this project. And they're here today as well to share a couple of words with you. And I introduce Professor Franz Hilkamp, the dean of IESE Business School, who's gonna say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to each one of you as well. Franz, are you here with us?
Yes. Yes, ma'am. I'm here. You can hear me, Fernanda. correct?
I can hear you. Yes.
Very good. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to say a few words. I'm a little bit embarrassed that I'm supposed to talk before Tomo Noda, because even though we started this project together, there's even among two people that do something together, there is one who says it first and who leads the initiative, and this credit certainly goes to Tomo, a good friend and colleague. I had the privilege and opportunity to see him last week in Japan. I'm back in Europe, so midday for me. Good morning to all on the western side of the world, and good evening to those on the eastern side. And thank you for having me. Fernanda already explained a little bit the history of this project and of this course, which has also evolved a little bit over these years, but it did start indeed in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic, precisely because we realized this was an opportunity when we were all confined or in other ways more isolated, to actually bring this theme of reflection on what are the foundations of our current socio-economic political system and how to operate productively and positively in this from a management perspective, to bring this reflection precisely to the online world, to Zoom in this case, and to exchange ideas with people from all over the world, and to do something also for our MBA students at the time, certainly, of a virtual exchange. So the ability to travel virtually and meet and discuss and debate and learn from each other with people from all over the world. And this has proven a success, clearly an interesting conversation, important conversation, and we've been blessed with the contributions of so many very, very prominent and distinguished guest speakers. You showed them already before, Fernanda. So it's been a privilege to work with these leading figures from different sectors, different parts of the economy, of the socioeconomic system. And they've helped us, I think, to dig deeper, to learn more about what we call as the course title, The Future of Capitalism. So I don't want to extend myself too much, just to say again, thank you and welcome. And I'm sure and hope that this will be, again, a very good experience, learning experience, with the help of these terrific speakers and faculty members that are accompanying us in this edition. So thank you, and back to you, Fernanda. And thank you, of course, to Tomo for having me here.
Thank you, friends. Such a warm welcoming. And now we have Tomo Noda, who will share a couple of thoughts as well. Tomo, I pass the word to you.
Thank you so much, Fernanda. Hi, hello to everyone. Thank you for coming to this program. I'm Tomo Noda, stationed in Japan, Tokyo, and I'm one of the initiator, and I'm the designer of this year's Future of Capitalism 2025. So I just wanted to briefly introduce why we are doing this and what we will do together throughout this course. Key assumptions, maybe a problem awareness of ours for this course is, as Fernanda says, we are in a critical time of change. Everybody understands that because of disparity between rich and poor and concerns for sustainability and capitalism. We are doubtful for the future of capitalism at this moment. That's a kind of critical time of change we are living together. We believe that business enterprise play a central role in the healthy development of capitalism, our economic system. And we, business enterprise, also has been a powerful vehicle driving the economy and shaping the society, and also continue to be a vehicle to improve society and the future. That is the assumption behind this course. So having said this, next slide, please. These are the questions we will together explore, and we will together ask ourselves, how do we evaluate the current state of capitalism? What could be the essence of business enterprise? And for whom or what does business enterprise exist? What roles can business enterprise corporation play in realizing a better society and future? Fernanda says more inclusive, sustainable, equitable, fair society and future. In doing so, what challenges do business leaders face? What roles and responsibility we fulfill for the healthy development of capitalism and society? And for us, educators, a critical question for us is to foster and support such business leaders. How should business education evolve? So these are the kind of the 5 broad questions we will cover throughout this program, and we want you to consider, and we will keep asking ourselves. So thank you so much, and I will be a presenter in the second session, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tomo. So a quick review of our sessions. I will be very brief because they are the protagonists. Where are we going? What are the challenges facing business enterprises and leaders at this critical time of change in capitalism? This is our first topic. Today, we're going to have Kate Warworth, and we're going to have Professor Maciej Bazela as the main facilitator. A very quick and brief introduction of Kate. She's a senior associate at Oxford University and author of The Doughnut Economics, which I personally read and really enjoy, who will introduce her visionary framework and for reimagining capitalism in a way that aligns economic activity with planetary and social boundaries. Joining her today, we'll have Sandra Wu, the former chairman of the Boston Consulting India Group India, who will share her perspectives. And we'll also have Arun Maira, former chairman of the Boston Consulting India, who will share his perspectives of business leadership in a rapidly changing world. And Professor Olawale Ajay, I hope I'm pronouncing it properly, of Lagos Business School, who will share his perspective rooted in the African management philosophy. Very quick, next session, what is a company and what is a manager, revisiting and going beyond the agent's theory? We have Professor Tomo Noda from Shizenkan with Professor Jordi Canals from IESE discussing this topic. Third sessions, where are the capital markets heading, including ESG and impact investment? How can we tame the capital market? And we will have Elodie Logel, the Chief Responsible Investment Officer, member of the Executive Committee of Amundi Group, talking to Professor Rebecca Henderson, Harvard Business School and author of Reimagining Capitalism. Fourth session, we will have Kalpana Akhter, examining the relationship between companies and society and the human rights issues. Kalpana is the founder and executive director of Bangladesh Center for Worker Responsibility. The session 5 will have exploring purpose-driven management and new corporation models such as the B Corp and the French legal framework Société à Mission with Professor Colin Meyer from Said Business School, University of Oxford. And we will have a discussion with J. Cohen Gilbert, the executive advisor of Imperative 21 and co-founder of B Lab, with Professor Armand Hatchell, emeritus professor of the School of Mines, BLS University, the chair of theory of the enterprise. Session 6, reflecting on the relationship between companies and the planet. And for this session, we will have Ariba Hamid, Executive Director of Greenpeace UK, is speaking with Marian Ladesme, Zero Waste Campaigner from the Greenpeace Southeast Asia, discussing with Rebecca Mikula-Wright, CEO Investor Group on climate change. Session 7, we will find out what are employees for corporations, no? Considering the relationship with the employees. And we will have Nitin Paranjpi, the chair of Hindustan Unilever and former chief transformation officer and chief people officer from Unilever, talking with Suzanne Poover, the CEO and CSO of IKEA India, and discussing with Professor Jean-François Mansoni, the former president and professor of leadership and organization development at IMD. Session 8, marketing and business models for a new era. Let's discover a little bit and cover a little bit this topic with Vincent Stanley, the director of philosophy of Patagonia and a visiting fellow at Yale School of Management. And with Professor Fabrizio Ferraro from IESE, the professor of strategic management and also the academic director of the Institute for Sustainability Leadership with me. Redefining corporate value creation is the topic for our session 9 with Pavan Suthev, the founder and CEO of Gist Impact, author of Corporation 2020, and Fabio Barbosa, the CEO of Natura & Co. Session 10, the business of value creation in an age of sustainability and well-being. We have Christian Heller, CEO of Value Balancing Alliance and Vice President of BASF, co-chair of Sustainable Finance Committee to the Federal Government of Germany. And John Elkington, the founder and chief pollinator of Volans, the proponent of the famous triple bottom line, and author of The Tickling Sharks, among other books. This is the latest one. And session 11, where is MBA education heading? Can we become the good ancestors? Let's speak with Roman Krznarik, senior research fellow at University of Oxford, author of The Good Ancestor. Let's discover a little bit about what he means. And with Paul Pullman, a business leader, campaigner, co-author of the famous as well, Net Positive. Where are we going? What are the challenges facing business enterprise and leaders at this critical time, changing capitalism? Our agenda for today, we have Kate starting with comments and questions from discussants and questions and answers to all of you, from all of you. Breakout session, panel discussion, and questions and answers again. And we end with a quick wrap up. I welcome Professor Maciej Bazela, who will be facilitating this session. Professor, are you around?
Yes, I'm here, Fernanda. It's very nice to co-host this session with you. Buenos dias. Good morning to everyone. A warm welcome. Warm greetings from Mexico City, especially to my academic peers, faculty present on this course, of course, all of you students. I hope you will enjoy this 5th edition of Future of Capitalism course, which, as has already been stated, basically has a major aim of helping you create your own mindset, your own critical approach to being conscious, critical business leaders in this fast changing and very uncertain world we are living in. Since we are running a little bit behind schedule, I will immediately pass the mic to our keynote speaker and presenter, Professor Kate Raworth, who does not need much presentation. She's a well-known academic, thinker, economist, and chairperson, a founder and director of conceptual lead of the Economic Action Lab. Professor Kate, it's very nice to have you in this first session, opening the course for us, giving us this general introduction, using your conceptual frameworks to, as we know, one of the biggest challenges ahead of us, how to build humane, sustainable, environmentally friendly business model. As we know, capitalism has been in crisis for quite a few years now, and we need to come up with some new frameworks and new solutions. So we are very happy to have you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you. And it's been a pleasure hearing the overview of this whole course that's coming. So hello to all the students. I've loved seeing people writing their names and where they're from today in the chat. This is a wonderful course, thinking literally globally about one of the most critical questions right now. I'm quite surprised that I'm here as well, I have to say, and it comes out of a conversation I had with Professor Tomo Noda when he told me, oh, we are running a course on the future of capitalism. And I said, I don't agree with that course name, and that is not the goal I agree with. So I personally am not committed to or interested in the future of capitalism. I'm interested in the future of humanity and life on this earth. For me, that is what we should all be here for. And that is what all business should be focused on, asking itself whether it is in service of humanity and life on this earth. And if it's not, why on earth does it still exist? So that's why I'm here. I'm here also because I'm very triggered by conversations about saving capitalism, improving capitalism, reimagining capitalism. I'm triggered for two reasons. One, because it means we are still definitely talking about capitalism. We're going to save it or reinvent it or reimagine it. Have we got no imagination to think beyond this current system of capitalism? So I don't want to assume that what we end up with, what you as a rising generation of business leaders will leave behind when you retire, I don't want to assume that it's still what we today call capitalism. The second reason I'm really triggered by conversations about capitalism is because we very often don't even define what we're talking about. And if we don't know what we're talking about, how can we really be clear? How can we know whether we're changing it? How can we know whether the new system that's evolving is still what we would define as capitalism? I think of it as often treated as what I would call a black box concept. It's this black box that we never really open. We just say capitalism, and we assume that everybody understands what we mean. So I have here the black box of capitalism, you see. And I think it's very important that we open this black box. I bet the 250 people on this call, if we all said, when you open this box of capitalism, what do you think you're going to find inside it? What is the definition? I bet you we would come up with different definitions. And if we have different definitions, are we sure we're having the same conversation? So today I want to unbox capitalism with you. In the same way that lots of people make unboxing videos for YouTube, whether they're unboxing a new pair of shoes or a new phone. Today, we're going to unbox capitalism together. And I want to invite you to think of it critically, as well as opportunistically. Throughout this course, I'm going to offer a framework. So I'm going to bring both donut economics, but also unboxing capitalism. And I'm really looking forward to doing this with you now. So I'm going to share my screen. And we can begin unboxing the future of capitalism. So let me start by saying thank you for having watched in advance these two videos that I set as previewing. The first one is me presenting the core concepts of donut economics. I'm going to be drawing on them, but I'm not going to present them again now. I'm going to assume you have indeed watched that video and you are familiar enough with these basic ways that I say I think we need to evolve in our economic mindsets if we're going to create an economics that is actually fit for the extraordinary, deeply challenging realities of the 21st century, the social inequalities and the ecological breakdown. For me, these concepts are key. So I'm going to assume you've already watched that video. I'm also going to assume you've already watched the second video that I shared, which was me talking at a conference about the importance of looking at the deep design of business. We need to understand what is the purpose of a company, its networks of relationships, how it's governed, how it's owned, and how it's financed. I'm going to come back to this because it's key for me in this conversation. So thank you for having watched these in advance. I'm going to build on this now. And I'm going to do so by starting again with the donut. I start here because I think we need to start with what we think most matters. And for me, this is one compass, one possible way that we can envision what it would look like if we think we succeed by 2100. What would be a successful century? I'm saying this right at the beginning of 2025. We are already 1/4 of the way through this century. We've got 3/4 of it left, and we've already wasted most of the first quarter. So I offer this as a goal for human and planetary thriving. Think of it as radiating out Earth's resources. Then the hole in the middle is where people are falling short on the essentials of life. And then we don't want to overshoot those planetary boundaries. So we want to meet the needs of all people within the means of the living planet. Leave no one in the hole. Don't overshoot the limits. We want to live in that green space in between. Yet we know right now we are very far out of that green space, a world deeply out of balance, billions of people worldwide falling short on the essentials of life. And given the range of countries that people are attending this course from, this is very real in many people's everyday. I think most of us, in fact, could step outside of our homes and see somebody in the street who is deprived on these essentials. I live in the city of Oxford in the UK. I can walk 100 meters and see somebody sleeping in a doorway. I'm in one of the richest cities in the UK. So here too, it's a reality. Billions of people worldwide are falling short on life's essentials. And we are overshooting many of the critical life supporting systems that make life work on this only known living planet in the universe. For me, this is the fundamental starting point of any conversation about how we want to improve the future. This is where we're at. This is what we've inherited. This is the reality we see. So everything that we design, everything that we choose to make happen, every investment we make, is it in service of turning this story around, or is it further exacerbating it? That to me is the question. I'm showing you a global story here. I want to take it down to the national level. Here are 4 national donuts that have been created by some colleagues of mine. You can see, for example, Malawi, massive human shortfall, all of that red in the middle, without overshooting any of their share of planetary boundaries. India, significant human shortfall and already some ecological overshoot on almost 5 times higher income per person. China, a double whammy challenge, human shortfall and significant overshoot on, again, double India's income per person. And then the United States, more than 3 times wealthier than China per person, still high inequalities in the country and massive ecological overshoot. So none of these countries have got it sorted. All of them need to transform from very different starting points. Let me put these in a scatter plot of 50 of the world's nations. The place where every country should be aiming to be is in that top left-hand corner, that little green donut you can see. That is where countries rise up to meet the needs of all of their people. So no one is left in the hole in the middle, but they also come back within the means of the living planet. They eliminate all of that very visible red overshoot you can see. So the first thing we should notice is that no country is there. Costa Rica is closer than any other. So I invite all of us, next time we find ourselves or anybody we hear saying or talking about developed countries, you can say, I'm sorry, where do you mean? Because there's not a single country in this graphic that should be calling itself developed. There's absolutely nothing developed about overshooting planetary boundaries and undermining the life-supporting systems for the planet, but also the prospects of people whose lives are dependent upon the rainfall, upon fertile soil, upon getting out of poverty. So there are no developed countries here. Here are the 4 countries I just showed you, shown across this scatter plot. And although these nations stand as separate dots on this graphic, let's also obviously remember that they are profoundly interconnected. From histories of colonialism, I say this as a white British woman sitting in the heart of the UK, right? My country was built on a colonial history, having impacts on nations around almost many, many European countries. Canada, Australia, and the United States that are sticking out there. Of course, they also have colonial stories, a settler colonialism. So colonialism is all across this story, and of course is deep at the heart of the history of capitalism. So there's histories of colonialism, but also current military power, corporate power, trade and finance rules between nations, resource extraction, the impacts, current and future of climate and ecological breakdown. These are all very powerful impacts between nations. So we need transformation of individual countries, but also the relations between. Now, capitalism loves economic growth. But the history of pursuing economic growth as a macroeconomic goal has generally taken countries in this direction. First, raising well-being, right? You get a massive benefit to go from where Malawi is up to where Ghana is in terms of doubling your income, improving child survival, nutrition, kids going to school, decent livelihoods, transport, electricity. But instead of going straight up into the donut, the vast majority of countries convert that additional income into ecological overshoot. They go straight past it. And here, in fact, these little lines you can see, these are actual data of nations from 1990 up to 2015. So you can see exactly how the vast majority of the world's nations, even the ones that are close to the donut, they're not heading straight into it, they're tending to go past it. Can we transform this direction, this trajectory? Because this is taking us away from thriving into planetary breakdown. Can we instead aim for the donut? What would it mean if the low-income countries rise up to meet the needs of all of their people without overshooting planetary boundaries, as all have done before them? Middle-income nations, here I'm talking about Russia, Turkey, China, Iran, Mexico, if they were to reorient straight in towards it, meeting the needs of their people without going into overshoot. This has not been done before. And then all of the high-income nations you can see. Yes, United States, Canada, Australia, but also the whole of Europe. Can these countries massively reduce their ecological overshoot while finally meeting the needs of all of their people? Because they certainly have the financial means to do that. This, too, is an unprecedented journey. So every nation needs humility and ambition. And this is only going to be possible if there is a major rebalancing between the world's nations. A rebalancing in terms of reparations, in terms of redistributing wealth, rewriting global trade and finance rules so they're no longer skewed against the world's poorest countries, rebalancing power and voice in global financial institutions, and many other forms of rebalancing that are required. For me, this is the map that the 21st century should be aspiring on. And I invite us to reflect on companies now. I haven't mentioned businesses yet. Now bring your mind to business. In all of these nations, there are, of course, companies, big and small. And there are companies that operate across the spectrum as multinationals. Are those companies in service of this directionality or the old pattern? And what would need to happen to make those companies actually be in service of bringing the world towards the donut rather than away from it? So let me go back here to this image of the world as it is today. All of the red in this picture shows us two things very clearly. This is a deeply degenerative global economy. We are running down planetary boundaries. We are overshooting them and destroying the life support systems of our home. And this is a deeply divisive world. While many live extremely opulent lives, billions of people are left falling short. This is incredible levels of inequality globally. To turn this story around, we need to change these dynamics. We need to move from degenerative to regenerative designs so that we don't use up Earth's resources, we use them again and again in a circular, cyclical economy. And we need to move from divisive designs of national regulation, of business, of taxation. We need to move from divisive designs to distributive ones so that we share value created with all who co-create it, the workers at the end of those global supply chains. So we need to transform the deep dynamics of the world. In light of that, how's capitalism been doing? I'm going to show you here some headlines from the past year. And it's not a pretty story. So over the last year, we saw a headline: Shell, a major fossil fuel company, waters down its net zero targets as it moves away from renewables. This is not a regenerative future. This is moving back to degenerative. Even Unilever, often held up as the poster child of ESG, the poster child of sustainability, has been watering down its commitments. In fact, nearly 240 major corporations missed the pledge deadline under the Science Based Targets Initiative. Companies are pulling back. They're doing less of this. Global circularity is falling every year. It's less than 10%, and it's falling. Dividend payments have been soaring globally, while workers' pay is stagnating. So the divides between the owners of capital, who get the share returns, and the workers who get the wages, that divide is widening globally. The world's 5 richest men have doubled their money as the poorest get poorer. Billionaires have spent nearly $2 billion on 2024 elections. That was just in the United States. And there were elections across the world. So just think of the scale of money from corporate and private extreme wealth that has poured into funding elections to make sure that those elections keep the system in the favor of those who have the money and the power. At the same time, stock markets hit an all-time high. So this is what happened thanks to the actions of the companies that are thriving under capitalism in 2024. And I'm really glad to be able to start this course with this, because this is hard hitting, I hope. I hope this feels uncomfortable. I hope this makes us say, my God, this system does not work. The system we have right now is actually destroying the possibilities of people and planet thriving. That's why I'm not particularly interested in the future of capitalism itself. I'm much more committed to the future of humanity and the living world, and asking a much bigger question, which is what kind of economy and what kind of businesses within it could possibly be in service to the world we desperately need to create, and that in our hearts we know is possible. And that's where I want to go now. So let's unbox capitalism. Let's know what we're even talking about when we talk together about capitalism. Here's 4 reasons why I think it's really important to unbox it. First of all, because capitalism is back. It's on the cover of many books. People want to reimagine it or save it or be angry about it. What are we talking about? Often when I look inside these books, I search for the definition of capitalism, but it's very often not given. And I think it's really important to be clear what we're talking about. The second reason is because if you say you're critical of capitalism, people very quickly say, oh, are you a communist? What? You're a socialist? Which is the most absurd, intellectually narrow response to criticizing the dominant and very currently destructive economic system we have. We need to have a much more nuanced appreciation of what we're talking about, so we don't pigeonhole each other and shut down debates with very out-of-date 20th century slogans. Third one, because people want to reimagine capitalism or rethink it or save it, or they want to have green capitalism, conscious capitalism, caring capitalism, sustainable capitalism, adding lots of nice adjectives. But I still want to know what is inside that noun. What is in that box? How will we know if we change this system? How will we know if it's still what we would call capitalism? Lastly, because I think it's really important to have respectful dialogue where we can respectfully disagree, where we can have our own critical opinions and understand and speak with nuance to other people who we disagree with. So in this session, I'm going to present 2 very different sides of capitalism, and I invite you to see which part of it you believe is true, but also to respect the views of other people so that you can be in a constructive conversation with them today and throughout this course. I'm drawing on 3 books that I have been particularly influenced by: Cannibal Capitalism by Nancy Fraser, How to be an Anti-Capitalist in the 21st Century by Eric Olin Wright, and The Code of Capital by the scholar and legal scholar Katerina Pistol. I profoundly recommend all of these books, but I've wrapped much of the insight from them into this talk. So here we go. What is capitalism? Here's a photograph that most people would say, yep, that's a capitalistic setup. I see a large factory. I see lots of workers. They're going to be paid wages. But what is capitalism? Well, I want to go back to the historical roots of this concept. Let's go back to Karl Marx. He's pretty highly associated with capitalism. He wrote a very famous book about capital. Marx said it's really important to look behind the sphere of exchange, which is trades and markets. We need to look into what he called the hidden abode of production. If you could lift the lid on the factory and go inside it. And he said inside the realm of production, there are 4 fundamental driving characteristics that define, in his view, capitalism. And here they are: market primacy, private property, wage labor, and the drive to accumulate. So let me just take us into these. We start with private property. And we're not talking about personal property. I own this jumper, right? This is my jumper. I don't think anybody's going to say you should share that jumper with everybody. We're not talking about personal property. We're talking about ownership of the means of production or ownership of wealth from which you can generate a return, whether that's land or housing or factories or intellectual property, but it's private ownership of something that generates wealth. It's a class division, so it shifts people into those who do own the means of production and the sources of wealth creation, and those who don't, and they become the workers. It encloses common resources, so land that may have been shared and commonly used becomes owned by private property. This happened in the UK in the 1500s under the rule of Henry VIII. It's happened worldwide in many different ways. But enclosing common land, or indeed closing common knowledge and making it private intellectual property. And it means at the end of subsistence livelihoods, if people no longer have land that they can live off themselves, they are forced into becoming labor. So let's move to the second one, wage labor. It creates a market for wage labor. You've been forced off your land. Now you need to come and earn a wage in my factory if you want to live. So it creates a market. People must sell their labor in order to survive. And that labor is mobile and available to contract. So it can be moved. It's not tied to a single farm like feudalism. That labor can be hired and fired and moved between factories and workplaces. That labor requires a wage to survive, so it depends upon getting the job. And there's a very strong power relationship here, of course, negotiating who captures that surplus value that's generated. Then we move to market primacy. This is that markets become the dominant form of economic provisioning. And then that requires commodification of provisioning by the commons. The land that was shared now to be turned into commodified land for rent, household work, or even state provision. So moving in markets in spaces that used to be run through the commons, places that used to be household work, or services that used to be provided by a government, whether that's healthcare or childcare. Markets lead in allocating inputs to production through prices and through investment opportunity. It's the market that decides whether we should build a new factory, build a new shopping mall, or invest in a hospital. That's a market decision. And also how that surplus is invested. When people earn profits, it's up to the individual to decide how they spend their profit. Shall I invest in my community? Shall I invest in my child's education? Shall I take a luxury holiday? It's my choice how that money is then spent. Lastly, the drive to accumulate. Wealth generates return through profits from multiple different ways, through dividends, which create from shares and equity, rent from land, buildings, and intellectual property, from interest that's earned through holding other people's debt. Capital has a systemic drive to accumulate itself. So the logic of capital is that this money must be reinvested to get more return on more return. This drive to accumulate is both a mindset and a system characteristic that I think is the most deep fundamental determinant that this makes it a capitalistic system. Capital becomes the subject. Capital becomes the subject of conversation and the focus of intention. Humans, some say, become its pawns, as does the living world. So this would be the 4 traits, and I want you to keep these in mind as we go through. So if this is the foundations of capitalism, let me click. Here are some varieties of capitalism, because of course it manifests in many different ways. Historically, it was industrial capitalism. This is what Karl Marx saw. Workers brought into a factory, so you have that separation of labor, and it's the workers' surplus that is captured and turned into capital that can be reinvested by the owner of the factory. Racial capitalism is capitalism that uses racial differences between people and focuses on othering people so that they can be denied their fundamental rights, so that they can be marginalized, left without rights, paid lower wages because they are in some sense dehumanized. So using race in order to dehumanize the other means you can pay them a lower wage. It's a form of power relation. And of course, these are both still contemporary today. Consumer capitalism focuses on our minds and making us believe that the best thing we can do is buy something new. But that thing will never satisfy. We will have unmet needs, endlessly desiring more to transform ourselves. So shifting towards ensuring that people continually buy through advertising and propaganda as its founder created. Financial capitalism places finance itself at the heart. So finance no longer is a means of exchange for purchasing commodities. It becomes the commodity through trading, through speculation, through hedging, so that it becomes the center. And there's no need for commodities. It's just financial speculation in itself, return built on return. Information capitalism, very prominent in the era today. Information becomes the asset, whether that's through intellectual property or the ownership of genes or scraping our data to create AI. And green capitalism, the rise of the claim and the promise that we can transform energy systems, we can restore the living world through the structures and designs of capital while driving strong returns. These are just some forms that capitalism takes over time. I'm sure that all of you could think of other ways that capitalism is manifesting. But I invite you to think about which of these you feel are dominant in the society in which you live and are dominant in the world in which you're focusing. So why does capitalism succeed? Let's just give it credit because it's the globally dominant system in the world. So I'm going to give 6 reasons why capitalism tends to succeed. You may not agree with them, or you may agree with them wholeheartedly. Whether or not you agree, I invite you to recognize what might be true or a tiny bit true within each perspective, or you can violently disagree if you think it's not capitalism that has created these successes. Many people say, well, the thing about capitalism is it delivers mutual gains. People enter into contracts freely because there is something to gain. So it builds on mutual gains. It's a win-win. There's no resistance. It allocates resources efficiently. So when there's plenty of information, capital will ensure that resources go to the investment, to the enterprise that will generate returns. And so it's an efficient way of ensuring that resources go to the place of greatest potential. Capitalism, they say, rewards risk and innovation. If somebody has a brilliant idea, investors with the resource will step in behind that and enable that risk and innovation to come to fruition. So things get invented through that risk taking that otherwise wouldn't happen. Capitalism can invest at scale because it brings together the savings and the assets of many, many small scale holders. It can invest at scale in a way that households or individual companies certainly couldn't, and even many nation states couldn't. And so we begin to get the scale that we need. Capitalism is a self-organizing system that it enables millions of buyers and sellers to coordinate through the price mechanism, through choices around investment, to produce systems of high complexity that are not centrally planned. And this is a very strong attribute of a system that is self-organizing. And then many say there are proven societal benefits. Just look at how life expectancy in the world has improved since, say, 1900. And you can see in this graph, many people say that's capitalism that has done that, that's lifted life standards, got many people out of poverty. So I invite you to reflect on each of these, and to the extent that you think it is indeed capitalism that has or has not driven these positive benefits and caused the success. But we also need to ask how capitalism exploits, because this is why many people are profoundly critical of the system that we have. And whether or not you agree with the 6 things I'm about to set out here, I invite you to ask yourself what might be true in each of them in the current design of capitalism that we have today. So capitalism, many say, creates class oppression because it depends upon extracting surplus wages or surplus value from workers by holding wages low, by repressing union organization, by preventing worker power. And here we see the police are brought in to create that oppression. So across the world, we could point to occasions where workers are oppressed in the name of upholding the power relationship that enables that surplus value to be extracted and reinvested as capital. Capitalism depends upon social exploitation. This diagram of very stereotypical, the man goes into the factory in the morning, does his day's work, comes home with a wage, but it's the household, the work typically of women, that reproduces him ready to go into the factory again tomorrow, that provides the care, the feeding, the meals, the healthcare, looking after when you're old, raising the children when they're young. So the capitalist system exploits the work, the unpaid caring work of households, and utterly depends upon it, but doesn't reward it. Capitalism is based on racial expropriation. And again, as a white British woman sitting in the United Kingdom, this cannot be lost on me. These countries' exploits were built on colonial empires of expropriating billions of people from their lands around the world. But this is, if you go back to the root of many capitalist enterprises, whether it's the British East India Company or the Dutch East India Company, it often begins with a violent expropriation, taking land away from others, claiming through violence and through force, seizing assets that are then turned into capital. And this continues today with land grabs, contemporary land grabs and resource grabs. It entails ecological exploitation, logging of forests because a tree is apparently worth more as timber than it was as a biodiverse region of the world. This is true of the climate as it is of ecosystems. Capitalism has been captured. Lawyers are hired by the world's wealthiest companies to ensure that they legislate to create tax havens, tax avoidance, to ensure that the rules of the system stay in their favor. And that's what the Code of Capital by Katharina Pistor really highlights. But also this political capture of the media, of the ownership of the newspapers, of the news channels, so that it ensures that the systems of society help to reproduce the benefits of capitalism for the owners of capital. So I invite you to reflect on these and ask yourselves, do you agree with all of them? Do you think these all are exploitations of the capitalist system? Do you think any of them are not true or just a grain of truth? I invite you to find at least a grain of truth in all of them. So let's step back a moment. If these are the 4 foundational traits of capitalism, what changes would you propose to maintain it, to reform it, to evolve it, or to replace capitalism? What changes would you propose so that you actually create a future of capitalism, if that's what you're here for, that actually ends class oppression, ends social exploitation, no longer racially expropriates, ends ecological exploitation, no longer captures the legal and the media system and the political system? What kind of capitalism would that be? What would have to fundamentally change here to make that possible? And if you want to go beyond capitalism, say scrap it, replace it, then we bring the challenge, which is, okay, if we want to propose an other economic system, how are you going to design this new economic system so that it does actually create mutual gains? It does allocate resources efficiently. It does reward risk and innovation. It is self-organizing because century planned systems have very often failed. It does invest at scale and it provides societal benefits. So any of us, whatever our political or ideological views about capitalism, these challenges on both sides of this slide are real for all of us. And I invite you again to hold this and carry this through every single lecture in this series. I invite you to listen to each lecture and ask, which of these these exploitations is this person seeking to overcome? And which of these attributes is this lecturer seeking to sustain? What are some strategies for changing capitalism? And I'm coming to the end here. I want to turn to the work of Eric Olin Wright. He is an anti-capitalist. And so let's listen to how he says, here are some different ways that you could transform capitalism. First of all, he said, well, the first way is just to change the game, to smash it, end it, revolution, get rid of capitalism. Okay. He also says that's not very likely. I don't think that's going to happen. Not soon. Or even if it might happen one day, let's look at some other strategies. So we're not going to change the whole game. Although some people say absolutely we are. But if that doesn't succeed, then what? Can we change the rules of the game? So 2 ways. One, he talks about dismantling capitalism. He says, for example, bring back the state. In the United Kingdom, where this photograph is from. If I'm ill, I go to the doctor and I'm treated for free because it's paid for through taxation. It's a free service driven by the state. So dismantle capitalism by bringing back public services and common services where markets have taken over. Or underneath here, slightly softer, tame capitalism. Okay, capitalism creates some very exploitative circumstances. So we need to add in things like unemployment benefit for when people are unemployed. We need to protect people from the worst damages that they can be exposed to of a capitalist system. And if you think you can't go there, well, change the tactics. So some people resist capitalism. So workers organizing to make sure that they are not overly oppressed through the wage bargain. Let's organize so that we at least can secure a living wage. We're not going to manage to overthrow this system. We're not going to manage to change the rules, but we're going to make sure we get a living wage. And the last one he shows here is escaping capitalism. I'm just people who want to get out. This is not available to the vast majority of people. Let's go and buy some land, set up our own community, and just create our own alternative utopia. He also says, can we erode capitalism by doing something of all of these? And I suspect that throughout this lecture series, you're going to hear examples of people bringing something from all of these, I hope. He calls it eroding capitalism. People on this course might flip that and say, no, that's saving capitalism. Or that's making capitalism fit for the 21st century. So my last point here, though, is that for me, focusing on the future of capitalism keeps capitalism centered. And for me, that's problematic. I'm here for humanity in the living world. If capitalism needs to deeply change beyond recognition for that, it's fine by me. I'm looking for an economic system that actually serves humanity. I'm personally not committed to it being called capitalism or having those traits. We must explore alternatives. And that's where we go to the deep design of business. There are many, many different designs of companies, and I know some great corporate leaders are coming on this course. And let's just keep in mind that you can have a street market or a supermarket. They are designed and owned and run in completely different ways. You can have a cooperative or a corporate, again, designed and owned and run in completely different ways. They are charged by different questions. Some companies are just driven by this underlying question of how much financial value can we extract through the way we run this enterprise. They are driven by driving financial returns for the owners of capital. And other companies say, how many benefits can we create through the way we run this enterprise? I believe the 21st century deserves to be dominated by companies that ask that second question. So we need to redesign the deep design of business. So my last slide for you, coming right back to the fundamentals of capitalism. I know that in this course, you're going to hear from corporate leaders and thinkers who are, in fact, challenging some of these fundamental designs of capitalism that Karl Marx wrote. Wage labor? Okay, what if the employees actually own the company? So there's no longer a separation between workers and owners, and they share in its profits. Well, one company that does this is a major supermarket in the United Kingdom called John Lewis, but there are employee-owned companies all over the world. In fact, they're growing rapidly. That is a fundamental redesign away from capitalism. What if companies were not privately owned, but actually steward-owned, guided by purpose? That's what has happened to Patagonia and many other companies that have moved away from private ownership into steward ownership, so that it's not actually held as a private property. What if market actors recognized and respected their profound dependence on the state, on the household, and on the commons? Businesses utterly depend upon the provisioning by these other forms of economic organizing. The fair tax mark is a mark that major companies sign up to, committing to pay the right amount of tax in the right place at the right time, because they know that they depend upon and therefore must give back to society. And the drive to accumulate. Well, what if a company's goal is not to accumulate and grow endlessly? The goal is to contribute to social and planetary thriving, like the web browser Ecosia. So there are already companies in the world that are challenging the fundamentals of capitalism. I know some of them onto this course, and I invite you at the end of the course to ask yourselves, if we adopted some of the most progressive, ambitious and visionary propositions that they put forward, would this still be what we call capitalism? I think it won't be. I think if we actually draw on these to create the kind of economy that enables people and planet to thrive, I think it will go beyond Marx's fundamentals of capitalism, and I will celebrate that. So I leave you with this. Marx said these are the 4 fundamentals of capitalism, and contemporary definitions may differ, but they all include these. I showed you what capitalism's been doing in the last year. It's not in service of life. Right now, it is not in service of life. So how can we overcome these extraordinary ways in which capitalism exploits? But how could we create a new economic system that actually maintains or achieves the reasons that people say it succeeds? And how can we look into the deep design of business in doing that? I want to close here, but I want to share with you that I have created decks of slides for all economics lecturers and professors, and of course students around Doughnut Economics. So if you're interested, they are here at doughnut-economics.org/university-courses. Slide decks, reading resources, videos. If anybody is interested in teaching or studying deeper into these concepts of Doughnut Economics, I warmly welcome you. They're free online. I would be thrilled if you start to use and share and teach from these, and please do let us know. And my colleague Erin Sahan created this dedicated tool on Doughnut Design for Business if you want to dive deeper into that tool. I'm going to stop here. I've really enjoyed unboxing the future of capitalism with you so far, and I look forward to the conversation that entails. Thank you very much.
Professor Kate, thank you very much for this very rich and very precise, very enriching presentation. It's hard to imagine a better start of this course. I can assure you that you are already creating impact. There are so many comments on the chat. I invite you to revisit them. First of all, most of our students are already asking us to share your presentation with them. And also there are many interesting questions. I will just, as we are transitioning to our comments and questions from the discussants, I will just highlight 3 or 4 comments that drew my attention. Nitesh, for example, at the very beginning, I think you addressed it, but he was asking about major clarity on the concept of capitalism, and he was asking about the importance, for example, of Protestant values and Protestant ethic in our perception of capitalism. Fargol, I think you addressed it also at the very end, but we can revisit it. Fargol was asking you about a clear comparison between conventional capitalism and Doughnut economics. And Diani was asking whether corporate governance standards could be a solution to errors and failures in conventional capitalism. And finally, Verent Toshi asked, I think, very pertinent and practical questions. How do we put in practice Doughnut economics, especially in terms of wealth distribution and equality in society? So these are just a couple of things that are there on the chat. I do hope you will have, you still have time to stay around with us and participate in Q&A later on. In the meantime, I will let you to grab some coffee, have a rest, and I will move to our discussants who have been already introduced by Fernanda. So I will ask Sandra, Arun, and Olawale to open their mics and offer their comments and questions. If I may, I will just offer you one pointer to keep in mind as you react to our keynote presentation. I would like to invite you to offer us your own perspective about challenges and opportunities of capitalism in different regions and economies that you come from. I really would like to open with taking advantage of the richness of the panel that we have, of our discussants. We have different nationalities, different perspectives, different business experiences. So I think it would be very enriching as you comment on Kate's presentation. You also offer us your own reflections about how you live and how you perceive the challenges of capitalism in the regions you operate right now. So with that, if I may, I will ask perhaps first Sandra to offer her comments to the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. G. But first of all, Kate, this is one of the most interesting unboxing video I have read. Thank you so much. And you really opened my eye. I read your presentation in advance, and today you, as Professor Bozzella just mentioned, I think you also provide lots of impact, not just only to students, to myself as well. Well, I have been working with UN for more than 10 years, from the natural disaster reduction all the way to Global Compact on the 4 areas, 10 principles. So, well, I really share and agree with you is, well, I'm not educated by any business school, or I mean, not business school, I mean, like the capitalism. I learned how to do business from my parent, from my senior. And I think the first intention is not persuading for the capitalism or whatever ism, but is how to first, I think the base instinct and the first motivation is how to make, I mean, a better life for, I mean, my family, ourselves, and then for the future generation, our children, etc. And then we have the responsibility to protect the company, I mean, our staff. And then we also have to work closely with our clients to get the satisfaction in order to make sure that our business can sustain. So I think this is the original intention for us to start the business. And then I start my corporate career. And that will be I think we learned all this from maybe our senior and the previous, I mean, the previous generation and the founder and etc. So, but today, as I mentioned, because of the experience with Global Compact, I fully agree with you, because why I joined and also accept the opportunity to become the board member of the Global Compact is I really impressed by the former Secretary General Kofi Annan. He just called for a business to give a human face to the global market and to create this Global Compact of the share the value and the principles. And then that's the time I realized actually, as a global citizen, I mean, business as global citizens, we also have a lot of things that we can contribute and to work together. So this is my comment stop here. But as you mentioned, there's so many things. I mean, as an individual, as a human being, and also as a business leader, maybe because my experience, I don't see I see a lot of challenges, but I really think that this challenge actually is help us to rethink our business, how we can, contribute to the society and even to the planet through our core business. And this is what we are executing. And I really believe, and it is in my blood and my faith. But I would like to ask, what do you see, and what do you think the corporate can do better? Forget about the capitalism, but how we can do better to, as you mentioned, that we can achieve those goals together to make a better, society and the earth. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Kate, would you like to offer a quick answer?
Oh, you would like me to respond now? I can do it very quickly. Okay. Let me just come back with this. So what can a corporate do better? I think the design of corporations is problematic. I think the fact that we have created companies whose deep design is that they are governed on short-term shareholder returns means that people who work inside companies, even though they may absolutely be driven by the purpose and may have joined with a profound purpose of bringing about sustainability, I hear time and time again people say we just caught in the quarterly reporting, we are beholden to the markets. So I find it very difficult to say what corporates can do better, because I think fundamentally the design that we have inherited of the corporate structure is inherently designed on the drive to accumulate. It prioritizes that, or the drive to deliver dividends, for example. And I think we need to go back and redesign the fundamentals of companies. And that's why this, for me, is the focus. If we design business again so that it can be in service of life. So I think we could have large companies but they will be designed differently so that they are actually in service of their purpose. They will, and again, of course, here, finance, right? And anything, what lies deepest is the most powerful, and it's the finance. The financial system puts pressure on companies to deliver those returns. We need to deeply redefine what is finance, because until there's finance that's actually in service to life, there won't be money for companies that seek to be a vehicle for bettering the world. So it's a very, very profound question that you've raised. I'll leave it there.
Thanks a lot. Just to make transparent my logical flow for the coming minutes of this session, I see that there are hands going up among our students, but sticking to the structure of this session, let me introduce Arun and then Professor Olawale. Each of them will offer a quick comment and then a question to Kate, and then we will open the floor for Q&A with students, to which we will dedicate another 10 minutes. Sandra, thank you so much for this first question. We will keep you on hold for a second. And with that, I will switch to Arun. Arun, I hope you are there. Thank you. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Kate. Having listened to you, having read all your books before, but having listened to you today, I realize that I don't need to read anymore. I just need to go visit that website that you pointed us to with all the free material, and I could get all the inputs of digested knowledge, which are so relevant to answer the question that I have, which you have obviously, because you kicked us into getting that question in our mind, is we want a different world, in a system of running the world, of governing the world, of the economy of the world, the politics of the world that is good for everyone, and for all living beings on the planet. I would say, since we say that please talk from the perspective of your region, this was Mahatma Gandhi's vision. And he was very actively struggling against, of course, as you said, the British Empire and its power, as well as the designs of enterprises in the country, both the governance enterprises as well as the business enterprises. And he said that, look, I'm a capitalist, but I want capitalists to be trustees. So I just put that thought out. Now, here we are in the world today. I'm really concerned about the world, the way it's going, especially because at the inauguration of the United States president, just see who was on the podium with him and in the hall. Those are capitalists, I presume. They're around him, and they are now determining rapidly, the very first day, things that need to be done, like, for example, unwinding all the actions to improve the state of the environment, all the actions that were allowing people who had less in other countries to come in and participate with the people who are already very wealthy, like in the United States, to create value. And they will work hard and create value, but shut them out. And you mentioned this, Kate. There's something protective about ourselves, our race, and our rights to have everything, and others don't have it. So I'm talking like, and I'm told in my country, I've had a long career in the business world, in the corporate world, that I sound like a communist. I sound like a union leader and not like a CEO or former CEO even. You know, I did start with the Global Compact at its foundation at the request of Kofi Annan. I was an advisor on the board, the first board also of the United Nations Global Compact more than 20 years ago. And when I see how little the Global Compact has been able to achieve, we have to think about why. Why is it when good people with very good intentions, good hearts, get together and say, we are going to take some responsibility to change the direction in which the system is working, they have achieved so little. They have achieved so little. So I want to just jump into this, that when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, a US advocate for workers' rights said that the only remaining totalitarian state is the Western Capitalist Business Corporation. And since then, owners of financial capital, and you pointed to this, Kate, already, have acquired even more power. They have been granted the right to sue sovereign democratically elected national governments for infringing investors' rights to make more profit. And you mentioned about the limited liability business corporation. It's a legal invention. And the first, as you said, were the East India Company in 1600 AD in Britain. And my country here has been a real victim of the exploitation legally, with the right legally granted by the Queen of England at the time, and also the Dutch East Indies companies around the same time, granted rights by their governments to operate as this form of enterprise, to make as much profit as they could, financial profit, for shareholders back in their own countries. The responsibilities of the Board of Governors, I read the minutes of the East India Company at least, they're on record, were just to ensure that the accounts were kept and the money was brought back. There was no cheating on the way. The money came back and it was equitably distributed. Amongst whom? Amongst investors in proportion to how much they had invested. The principle of good governance in a capitalist enterprise is ownership, and decision rights are determined by how much you own, by property rights. And it is only fair in a capitalist enterprise that he who owns $1 million must have 1 million votes. And an owner of $1 must have only 1 vote. In contrast, in a genuine democracy, it operates on the principle of human rights. Any human being with a beating heart, no matter whether she has $1 billion or none at all, must have an equal vote to shape the policies of that enterprise. And so when the Soviet Union collapsed, as you know, in 1991, Francis Fukuyama famously declared that the history of ideological conflict had ended. He said, or they said, the better way to run an economy was laissez-faire capitalism and not socialism. And the best way to govern a country was with multi-party electoral democracy. That was 1991. 2025, just look who's on the stage in Washington. What's happened to democracy also? What has capitalism done to corrupt the governance of the world and corrupt democracies? And therefore, I say the history of ideologies has not ended. And we can see falling by the wayside over the last 20 years, not just the United Nations Global Compact, but all this advocacy of DEI and ESG, all the great advocates of these ideas, actually in the corporate world, in trying to implement them, have run for cover, So the time has come, as the walrus said to the carpenter, and just being funny a little bit in Lewis Carroll's poem, for thoughtful and caring people to discuss many things, to solve some fundamental problems. And I want to pose these 3, not just to yourself, Kate, but to the organizers of this wonderful program, which students have the privilege of learning in this program. I do feel that you're really blessed at this time to learn about things which are really going to matter in your life and for the lives of many people around the world. And I'm mentioning 3 fundamental problems. One, you mentioned already, Kate, is the design of a new legal form of enterprise. Don't just talk about it. It has to be made a legal enterprise whose purpose is to improve the world for everyone and not produce more wealth for financial investors. There are a few examples, but we even probably won't hear from them in this program. An enterprise whose management is legally accountable to civil society with enforceable regulations, and not only to financial investors and stock market regulators, which is the present paradigm. Second problem, how to empower a wider movement to overcome the resistance from the powers in the present paradigm. They are not permitting change in the system in which they have enormous political power. And that's the truth of it, to go from where we are to this vision of the world that you have, Kate. You didn't express it, but I can feel it. And we must all have that same vision of a world that is good and fair to everyone, all living beings on this earth. We have to understand who is resisting this change. What is the source of their power and who are they? And now be wise. We don't have the same power. we'll have to find other sources of power. Other sources of power to be able to overcome the present power that is ruling the way the world is governed. And with
Very
this, I
well.
come directly to this program. We need to reform management education. Institutions of management education are themselves vested in the present capital paradigm of capitalism. Their market is large corporations, and they make their students more fit for the purpose of efficiently improving corporate profits. They also produce, they say, business entrepreneurs, whose success is measured by how efficiently they will exploit human and natural resources and how quickly the investors can exit and with how much loot. So please, let's think about what we are teaching and what is giving to us a sense of comfort that we are doing something worthwhile. And I want to say the content of the course, what is the point of having corporate leaders speak to students, corporate leaders who tried but have failed? What will you learn from them? What about inviting instead policymakers in socialist countries who are creating a world which is more equitable, at least for the citizens of their own countries, resisting or trying to resist the pressure from the capitalist world to change themselves from being socialists to becoming more capitalist? Listen to those people. Number 3, please listen more to leaders of cooperative enterprises who have workers and producers as owners and decision makers. And my country is full of them. But we never ever, I find in corporate programs, when we talk about change and making the world better for everybody, listen to them. We keep inviting some big corporate leader who has announced that, his company is going to give 4 or 5% of their profits towards some philanthropic effort. Let's listen to them, these great change makers. We're just getting the wrong ideas and wrong examples. It doesn't inspire me. I'm more inspired by people who are outside the paradigm. So I just leave this thought.
Thank you, Arun. If I may interrupt, there are already so many deep thoughts and questions. Kate, would you like to try to answer or comment very, very quickly on
I would just say that was wonderful to listen to, Arun. Thank you so much. That I massively appreciated and enjoyed hearing that incredible, rich and transformative perspective that you brought. And I'll say just one thing. I totally agree that the crucial nature of transforming management education, which is why I'm here today and why I joined this program, despite the name, because my friend Tomo Noda said, we're a business school for the 22nd century. I'm like, okay, that's the long game, and that's be visionary, and that's why I bring you a challenge. It's absolutely true that the universities are reproducing little capitalists to fit the current system. And I understand why students sometimes go for that, because they have to take on huge fees and need to pay off all their debts. So of course they want to get a really high paid job. But if we don't show transformative ideas and possibilities, we just keep reproducing. So I absolutely agree. But thank you, Arun. I really enjoyed those very wise words.
Likewise, Arun, thank you so much for sharing. Moving forward, we are massively behind schedule, so we need to speed up a little bit. We're gonna make a small adjustment in the program. We're gonna skip the breakout rooms. So for the moment, I will go very, very quickly to Professor Alawale. Professor, very nice to have you. I will ask you to be as sharp and as concise as possible with your comments and questions. And after you, we're gonna immediately go to Q&A mixed with panel discussion. So we'll try to wrap up everything and liberate the very last 5 to 10 minutes for Fernanda for the closing remarks. So Professor, it's nice to have you on the screen, and please go ahead.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to join you, and it's an honor to hear Kate speak in the flesh. And thank you for a very thoughtful presentation. I think what I see, and I really must thank you, Kate, for saying you're not happy with focusing the topic on capitalism. I suppose the founders of the course are just trying to be realistic, but I do agree with you that the essence is not necessarily on saving capitalism, but is about finding how to operate in the world for greater benefit of everyone. After all, even capitalism itself, the issue is it capitalism that comes first, or the social, political, and economic, foundations that hold up capitalism? I suppose it's the latter. And as society progresses, progress from feudalism to capitalism, capitalism wasn't something that was just, that came and then put in place a particular set of social, political, and economic relationships. And that is why you have capitalism manifest in various forms in various countries. So the point really is that we should feel free to change those social political relationships. They're not a given that must, endure for all times. The essence really is what best serves human society. And of course, you have people like George Reisman, who more or less said, maybe controversially, that the capitalist is actually, really supposed to ensure that it delivers captivity that gives workers a living wage. So that Marx, probably was discussing what he saw. But if we take the perspective that we can even rethink, these relationships from the point of view, what are the goals, what are the objectives, then there's no reason why it should be so. I do agree that fundamentally the way capitalism operates in its varieties has dispossession at its center. And I think that is the major issue. But do we need to organize social economic relationships on the basis of dispossession? I think that is not necessarily so. Nancy Fraser talked about exploitation and expropriation. And I think that is basically the truth about capitalism the way we have it now. Now, when we talk about social, political, and economic relationships, and even of capitalism, we're certainly talking about ethical values. I mean, whether you order society through capitalism, socialism, whatever it is, it's based on ethical values, and we must, bring that to the fore. Of course, there are also spiritual values, but people feel very uncomfortable talking about spiritual values. But capitalism itself was based on either secular ethical values or Protestant ethical values, or whatever other ethical values that you have. These values are what were used or are used to validate whatever types of capitalism we have. And these are also not immutable. And that is why when I look at the African continent, we have our own values. We have the Ubuntu values, where the whole essence is that you are in society, but you also have the right, you have the agency for self-expression, but not just a self-expression for your selfish interest. Society also exists to help you exact the best self-expression. Your own best self-expression is also meant to grow society. So, and that is the way we see Ubuntu in Africa. In my own country, we have the concept of Omoluabi. Omoluabi actually speaks to character, a noble character, but it is still along this ethical value of Ubuntu. And the Omoluabi concept requires you to be noble. It requires you to exert yourself in terms of self-development, but also to think about community, and even to be not to be churlish to those who do not treat you well. So I think, and in the Ubuntu or the African conception, we do have this, even in customary law, we do have a concept that a human being is actually in a contemporaneous relationship with ancestors who have gone and children who will be born. And so you must respect, you must, in other words, treat the stock of assets, the opportunities you have in trust for, the ancestors who have gone, the children who are coming. And to that extent, the African mindset is that we are one with nature. Of course, colonialism and capitalism and so on have sort of denuded that very, very thoughtful and very useful way of thinking. But we even have notions of rights for nature, rights for animals. This idea that there must be harmonious coexistence, between human beings and other creatures. The idea that you are here on earth in trust. These are fundamental values in Africa, which unfortunately we're not teaching in the business schools, but which we should go back to teach. First of all, the point of view that capitalism shouldn't merely be about dispossession. And here we have Tony Elumelu's concept of Afri-capitalism. Well, it's the idea really is that Africa must develop on the basis of vaunting the entrepreneurship of the people, and businesses must be invested in creating impacts. The company should be seen more as a community. This doesn't say there should be no profits. It's, because I think even in capitalism, we must determine what is, what is profit. And even if I take it, I'll be rounding up very soon. If I take it to Christian values, then entrepreneurship certainly is a Christian value. And God himself is the entrepreneur who talks about giving people a stock of capital, and he expects you to create value from the stock of capital. That doesn't necessarily bring in expropriation. It just means that you are not supposed to waste resources. If you're supposed to increase those resources by activity, entrepreneurial activity. And I think you find some capitalist authors who actually poo-poo the whole idea of entrepreneurialism. Now, the major aspect of entrepreneurs, maybe you call them heroic entrepreneurs or heroic capitalists, is that they are frugal. That you must produce surplus. And I think God even wants us to produce surplus, but it doesn't say we should, sit in opulence or wastefulness. So I think that is where from African business schools, beginning with my own school, really needs to go back and say, what type of managers do we need to create? And I think probably this is this is what I would just want to offer. I hope I'm succinct enough, and probably this hopefully provokes some thought on how we can go about ensuring that the greater goals of society are created. Of course, human rights are critical issues in the current epoch. They always have been, and they will not cease to be. And no matter what happens, we must insist on that. Sustainability, we must insist on that.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm very sorry to interrupt.
Yes, okay, thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing this third perspective. I think it's also very valuable analytical lens to remind us that theology is not in contradiction and religious values are not in contradictions with capitalism. As you rightly say, it seems that even God is a capitalist in a sense. And I'm sure we will come back to
I didn't say God is a capitalist. I said he believes in entrepreneurial creation.
Fair enough.
Yeah, so sorry, I have to butt in there. Thank you very much.
Fair enough. I'm sure we will come back to this issue of underpinning ethical values in our discussion with students. I would like to dedicate the last 20 minutes to that part of the session. If I may summarize everything that happened on the chat with one question to you, Kate, and then I will open the floor to direct questions. There are many questions about direct practical applications. So my question to you, Kate, is the following. If you were an advisor to G7 or G20 or G30 or any other important organization, what is your number one suggestion in terms of public policy, in terms of correcting, if I may, our conventional capitalism and putting in practice Doughnut economics?
So small questions then, hey? Okay. Let's say it's advising to the G20 or the G7, and let's assume they actually have power to enact advice and don't find that they are so overwhelmed by corporate lobby and money that they can't act on advice. But first of all, let's close the tax havens. Right. Let's stop allowing capital to hide its money in countries that offer it preferential rates, because I think this is undermining revenue for all nations, and it's creating a playground for capital. For me, I want to go a long game on this. I don't want to try and tweak small things around the side. I want to say, and going back to a point that Arun made actually about a legal framework for alternative business models. So enabling different designs of business to come through, and ensuring that finance, right? We need to really deeply redesign finance. So if we don't redesign finance, there is no money that's going to flow into companies that are actually designed for the purpose of sustaining and enabling life. So I'd actually like to meet with the G20 finance ministers and sit them around a donut-shaped table and ask them what kind of finance would be in service to this. So for me, the changes are long-term and deeper, and I'm not so focused on small tweaks today or tomorrow. I really believe this is a critical moment in a very specific moment in political time, when corporates are literally running the government of one of the world's most dominant countries. So this is going to affect all of us. And it's a time all the more that we need to show alternatives and show their viability and show their possibility. And to come back to the wonderful last presentation from Professor Ola AJ, talking about noble character and ethics, and knowing that there is that in every one of us. But do we create corporate structures that allow us to bring that to work, or actually force us to leave that at home? Most people feel they can't bring their ethic to work. They have to leave it behind. That's their family man or family woman. We need to be able to bring our whole selves to work. And that means the redesign of corporate structure. So until we redesign what we think is a successful company at scale, I think we're not going to transform more deeply. So that's my answer.
Excellent. So it's finance, ethics, and corporate governance. Very well. So putting the chat aside, let's move to direct question from the floor. I do beg you, please be as concise as possible. We don't want to hear comments at this point. We want to hear direct questions. I will try to accommodate as many as possible. You can ask questions either to Kate or our discussants. So having said that, Sanjay Das, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Sanjoy from AIT. I love the presentation. My question is that, and I'm no intention of raining on the parade of optimism which has been painted on this whole topic. The fundamental human drivers that construct any economic system is, for human beings anthropologically, is greed and innovation, right? And both actually cater to capitalism. I see Arun vigorously disagreeing with me. But a question is that, we have seen that incremental benefits, as suggested by Kate, has been backtracking, like in a Unilever and Shell as a case of example. I would think that, do you think that the Gandhian principles, which was proposed by Arun, is the way by which you can actually effect a change of heart in the individuals? Because without a change of heart, the profit incentive for shareholders in corporations will not go away. So I think it's more fundamental than cosmetic changes. And my question is that, do you kind of agree with me? And is there a way where ethical change of heart principles are adopted in the way capitalism is changing?
Thanks, Sanjoy. Great question. And I profoundly agree that and I didn't touch on it here, but if we lift the lid on capitalism, what is the character of humanity that we'll find inside this box? Is it actually that old character of rational economic man? I don't think so. I think, again, the rational economic man that is depicted to us, who is driven by, he has money in his hand, ego in his heart, a calculator in his head, nature at his feet. He hates work, he loves luxury, he knows the price of everything, and he can never get enough. That is the character of humanity that has been placed at the heart of economic models. And research has shown that the more that economic students and business students learn about this character of rational economic man, the more that they actually start to mimic him over time. And the more that they say they value competition instead of collaboration, the more they value self-interest over altruism. So the models that we make of ourselves actually remake us. So I agree with you absolutely. It's a profoundly psychological question. But I think there lies in us a wonderful complexity of human potential. The British philosopher David Hume once wrote that there is inside every one of us something of the serpent and something of the dove. I'm a mother of 16-year-old twins. So I've spent the last 16 years watching tiny human beings emerge into members of society. And as in any sibling relationship, or indeed any individual, there's sometimes the competition and the greed, and I want that, and there's the collaboration. And I see my role as a parent to nurture the collaborative, the social, the noble, because that is part of the human potential. But we need institutional structures that actually enable us to show up like that. And I think the work of Elinor Ostrom was key in this. She showed that there are principles that enable people to collaborate in a commons. It doesn't mean that competition or rivalry goes away, but we learn to create structures that actually hold it and enable us to do something much bigger and better, which is to collaborate. And I think we can design companies that bring that to its heart. So I absolutely agree with you that there's the psychological question, and it comes back to what is the education that we give to students. If I said to you, please step into this room of 50 people, by the way, they're all out to get you, you will enter in that room in a completely different, suspicious way than if I said, please step into this room of 50 people. They are wonderful collaborators and they would love you to join the team. So we show up differently depending on who we think is there. And I think we excessively suspect other people. We think other people are more determined to cheat us and to compete with us and triumph over us than actually is the possibility in the human heart. And again, it goes back to the education. What are we taught? And again, religion, since it's come in here, what can religions give us as an alternative vision of who humanity can be? So yes, deeply important psychological questions. Thank you, Sanjoy. Really great comments.
Thanks a lot. I will choose randomly from the group. There are so many hands. I'm afraid we will not be able to answer all the questions, so I will be just picking randomly and try to accommodate as many as possible. Annabelle from EGADE, go ahead, please.
Yes, hi, I'm from Mexico. And hearing all the talks, I don't know, like if the government does not have the will to change our policies, maybe we are waiting a change up down, and maybe the change is done up, starting with us as consumers being conscious. And my question is for you, if we have as consumers real power to force, not to force, or maybe to move how we spend our money, and that maybe will change our government policies.
Thanks, Annabelle. I think that's a really important point. And I know that my own personal psychology and my own personal theory of change and motivation in the world is much more like this, much more bottom up. So when I'm asked a question, what do you want the G7 to do? It's not actually where my head naturally is, because I don't think that's where change is actually going to be happening. I'm committed to working with the people who arrive and start doing it anyway. As you say, the bottom up. So when my book Doughnut Economics came out in 2017, I was excited when lots of people started connecting with me on social media or in person, saying, I'm actually putting these ideas into practice. Some of them were teachers in a classroom or a business school. Some of them were mayors or councillors in a town. Some of them were really progressive entrepreneurs or business leaders who said, I want to do this in my company. Or indeed people in their homes. You're pointing to customers, right? And when we actually have purchasing power. So I want to bring those together, because they're both, whether I set up a small company or I'm buying from a small company, how do I behave? So we can absolutely work with people who are showing up and already saying, I have these values. I want to buy from this company because it's in my neighborhood. And I know that if this company thrives, my neighborhood thrives. I want to reinvest here. So a lot of the work that we do at Doughnut Economics Action Lab is absolutely with those folks who show up. I do think that we as individuals can have a big impact in how we choose to purchase and consume. There's a wonderful initiative called takethejump.org that says, if you want to live a lifestyle that's compatible with 1.5 degrees, here are 6 shifts you can make in your life. And they're things like, don't own a private car if you can avoid it. Eat plant-based food, be a vegetarian or vegan. Only upgrade your phone every 6 or 7 years. Only buy a couple of new items of clothing a year. So only take a long distance air flight once every 7 or 8 years. So I really like it because it's very clear about, like, these are things you can individually do. And I personally seek to live my life in alignment with that. But at the same time, we of course don't want to say, companies can produce what they like. It's up to the citizens, it's up to the consumers to make the right choice. All the ethical onus is on the individual. I'm offering you the cheap one and the expensive one, and it's just your ethical obligation to buy the expensive one. Of course, we don't want to do that. We want to edit out and remove from the market products that are just violating human rights and violating the integrity of the planet. That corporations should not have the right to sell those. So I think it's both the bottom up and the top down. But I absolutely agree with you, the importance of demonstrating that we desire and that we put our money and our choices behind a different lifestyle.
Excellent. Matome Tenga from Gibbs. We can't hear you just yet.
Can you hear me?
There we go. Go ahead.
Yeah, yes. Coming from South Africa, where the biggest struggle is inequality, it's poverty. How do you suggest, or at least one could even start to think of, how do we imagine the new way of distributing wealth, where the various resources that are used to generate wealth or means of living are finite in nature, without first redistributing from those who have or continue to exploit whatever is left of the resources we have. Thank you. I'll stop there.
Oh, when we talk about capitalism, we take on the most profound questions. Thank you, Matome. That's I feel a humility of jumping in and suddenly having a grand answer for this, right? You live in the realities of South Africa. You ask a nuanced and powerful question. I bet you have a better answer than me. Often the person who asked the question actually has the best answer. So I think that, and let me bring it back to the world of business. I want to start by saying, I think that what we need much more of in the world, this is just my personal view, is many small enterprises. So if I were working in the South African context, or I used to live in Zanzibar in Tanzania for 3 years. So my mind is going, that's the closest I can get to really feeling a lived experience. Seeing small enterprises thrive, because we know that they make a rich network in a community, and when there are small enterprises rising up in a community, something builds, and a bit like Annabelle's point, it's coming from within. We're not waiting for above. So building that richness of local markets and enterprise, of connection and neighborhood and interdependence, and a circular economy, which we need to move back towards, and many countries have never lost. A circular economy, of course, requires those connections because materials must flow. But at the same time, we need this global shift, because South Africa is one of the world's most unequal countries, as we know, and there's huge corporate power, often associated with mining and resource extraction. Again, that's why we do need the G7 and these countries to come together and end the tax havens and bring corporations back to land back in nations and respect the nations in which they're based, rather than using the world as a playground for headquarters here and tax receipts there and avoiding. So it's the combination of the two. And I think it's crucial. The reason why the donut has both the social and the ecological is because we will never tackle ecological questions if we don't first address deep human deprivations for people and show their interconnection. So that's why it's really important to me for always to be talking about these two at the same time.
Thank you. Luis Fernando, IPADE Business School.
Thank you. My daughter has a question. No, I'm kidding. She's talking a lot, but a question, open question for anybody, not someone specifically in general. As someone who is implementing or starting a startup with some of the design principles that you stated, Kate, how do you sell this to investors? If you bring an investor on board, we're not prioritizing shareholder returns, we're prioritizing impact. How, of course, you want to filter and get the right investors on board, but how do you pitch this to investors? That would be my question.
I am so delighted that your daughter is on your lap. I'm guessing she's about 1 or 2.
She's 5.5, almost 6.
Oh, sorry, I can only see the top of her head. Okay,
Yeah.
so I was guessing. She's 5.5. Okay, she's 5.5, and she was born in 2020, let's say. She is only going to be 80 years old in 2100. So I'm really glad that there is now somebody in this webinar who's actually receiving the legacy of all the conversation we're having today. She'll be there, and she will be able to write a report back to us. You know, what did we do? Did we do well? It's so important to have this longer term, the vision of the child. So how do we pitch this to investors? Okay, this comes back to that we just need different kinds of investors, because mainstream finance, as it's become accumulated, it's become global, and it just goes around looking for its 15% return or more, please, is not designed to be in service to life. It's in service to itself. And so we need to reinvent finance, and we need to find local finance. And I just want to give one example, actually, that often, I want to come back to Annabelle's point. Where's the local? So in Brussels, in Belgium, and I'm sure in many other places in the world, there's a small initiative that started up. It's called Citizen Fund. They bring together ordinary citizens who choose to step in. You can step in with a minimum of 250 euros. So I don't know what the dollar exchange rate, around $250. You invest. And you join, and you have, back to Arun's point, no matter whether you put in 250 euros or 2,000 euros, you get one vote. And so you create a pool of money, and then the local companies can apply that exist in the city, and they can apply and say, this is what we want to do as an initiative. And then the members of that group, they vote. What they're finding in this fund is because the person who put the money in is present at the meeting and they hear the investor pitch, they're not only listening to the percentage return, They're saying, oh, I'd love that to exist in my neighborhood. We actually need to tackle that. They bring them whole selves to work, to the meeting. They care about social, the deprivation. They care about the air quality, the parks, the experience for kids. And people are willing and putting their money in to projects that would never get invested on in the mainstream markets, because all of the information comes back to them. So again, it's about reconnecting to the full set of values. And of course, ESG and all sorts of reporting tries to do this, but there's something about the extreme separation that means at the end of the day, the only tangible thing that transfers through is the rate of return on finance. So again, this is a very local example I'm sharing, but there are ways we can bring our whole selves, the dove, not just the serpent. The dove shows up and will invest in things that otherwise they wouldn't. As I finish this, I'm going to put in the chat box right now 14 case studies that we have documented as Doughnut Economics Action Lab about businesses that are designed differently and are therefore actually bringing about different impacts in the world. Again, we need examples. We need to show ourselves this is real, this is possible. Some of them are small, some of them are big. Some of them are cooperatives. I hope Arun will be happy. But we can look at those and ask ourselves, and what kind of finance is actually in service to these? Because we need to redesign finance so that it gets behind these kinds of companies. And may your daughter judge us when she's 80. I wish we could all see the report now. How will we do these business leaders of the future, which will be of the generation in which she grows up? And I wish her the very best.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. As Kate is putting additional examples on the chat, we have 9 minutes and 5 questions, so it's doable. Let's try to answer all the remaining questions. Let's go to Nelly's Business School with Mohammed.
Yes, hello everyone. I just quick question. With all of the things that we said about capitalism and its branches and its mitigation, do you think it's possible to be able to change it more to benefit the people? Because whether we like it or not, it's not black and white anymore. And capitalism has intersected of all of the countries. So is there a way that we can mitigate it? Because whether we like it or not, companies, everyone is relying on capitalism to exploit them. And things are not black and white anymore, because every person that is going into this will say, I don't want capitalism. Once he reached the top, he say capitalism is great for me. So how can we leverage the system into making this more equitable for the society, rather than getting rid of the system all at once, which will make more destructive?
It's a great question, Mohammed. Thank you. And it really goes back to the slide that I showed from Eric Olin Wright. He was saying, do you want to smash capitalism? People say, get rid of the system, just get rid of it. I agree with you that if we tried to just get rid of it overnight, that there would be huge human suffering from people who are left without, deprived. I personally hope that was it our friend Luis, who the little 5-year-old girl on his lap. I really hope that when she is 80 years old and we look at the system, that the global system, and it's a thriving future, I don't think it will have the 4 fundamental design traits that Karl Marx spelt out. For me, and I'm just speaking my personal view on this, and it's the diversity of views that's really interesting. My personal view is I think we need to remove this drive for endless accumulation, because that is like an AI bot that we have put into the heart of business that just accumulates in order to accumulate, in order to accumulate, and it overruns and overrules human values, human rights, and ethics. It overrules the health of the living planet. And if we're going to get rid of that endless drive to accumulate, for me, I always come back here. We need to think about the deep design of business. How could we redesign a business so it's not focused on just delivering endless returns for its owners? So I think there are amazing opportunities, and I hear Mohammed, I could hear a pessimism there of we're stuck and what can we do? But I think there are opportunities because there are companies that are already doing it. They exist. In fact, some of today's corporate leaders who are on the verge of retiring, it's an easy point suddenly on the verge of retiring to have an epiphany and see that everything you did was actually problematic. But some of them are, like Yves Chouinard of Patagonia is changing the deep design of the company. And I respect that. And I think we need to see many more corporate leaders who start changing the design of capitalism from within, bottom up. Back to Annabelle's point, let's redesign it bottom up. We can evolve it and move beyond it. So I'm actually excited about that because I see people already doing it.
Let's go back to Europe for a second, to the Business School. Pilar, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Kate, for your words. And you brought up the AI bot, and it's something that I work in technology, and it worries me when I see the trend. You know, we were talking about different versions of predatory capitalism where we arbitrage racialized situations, and now we're starting to hear comments about digital labor, the agents, where people are able to get more value without actually returning or paying a fair amount of tax. So I would like to get your point of view about whether, you know, this new technology that's you know, seems to be the only thing that people in technology talk about is going to help or hinder the work that we have at hand.
Thanks, Pilar. As with any technology, what really matters is how that technology is, I'm back here again, how that technology is governed, owned, and financed. And therefore, that determines the purpose to which it's put. And at the moment, as we see, the way that AI is being created, evolved, financed, right, the money that's going into it, the way it's being owned and governed, means that its purpose is, I see, predominantly used for financial extraction, turning us into a attention deficit, you know, just robbed of our attention because we're being gamed by the system to extract our attention. So it's back to how it's being used as a tool. AI, of course, has a huge potential in medicine, in environmental restoration. It has huge potential to help us solve problems, but as Karl Marx said, you know, market primacy. It's the market that's determining how AI is being deployed, and it's being deployed on people who choose to invest in it because they want a return. So while we still have the drive to accumulate, tools like AI will serve accumulation, which continues to exploit all of that column of exploitations that I gave. So a dark misuse of the incredible capacities of AI ahead, unless we deeply redesign business.
We have 3 last hands. I will ask Francis, Taishi, and Radhika to form their questions in that order, one by one, and I will give Kate the chance to offer us the last answer before wrapping up the session. So Francis, Taishi, and Radhika, go ahead.
So this is Francis from CUHK in Hong Kong. I'd like to ask, or I'd like to challenge this whole idea of finance serving ownership. Ownership isn't just fat cat capitalists or billionaires. Behind it, there are pension funds. We are all trying to save for one day when we can retire. You're a published author. I'm sure when you write your books, you want to sell as many copies as possible. There is a fundamental human drive behind capitalism to accumulate, not for the sake of accumulation, but to accumulate for a rainy day. And whatever is presented here today, I'd like to challenge how you can simply say, oh, it's just greed behind human nature, because there's more than that. There is, like I said, the need to save a rainy day. There is a need for Luis to save for his daughter because she needs an education, and who knows how inflation will come out and how much that's going to cost. So behind all of that, capitalism does serve a purpose. And I'm not sure the whole idea of, oh, we can just all live within our means is genuinely sustainable or even realistic. And I'd like to hear your reply on that.
Excellent. Taishi, your concise question.
Yes, thank you very much for the session today. I'm quite interested in the connection between finance and social welfare. So that the previous question about the investment was so interesting. To advance a little bit about that question, I'd like to know, in actual way, by some examples, what things will bring people to invest in a project which will have the social impact? What kind of things attract people to invest in such project? maybe by some sort of the quantitative statistics of the social impact, or maybe a kind of the beautiful story that attract social, like individual investors and so on. So I'd like to know like some examples of which what kind of things you think that some become a nudge for such like individuals to make invest in social programs. Thank you.
Excellent. And last but not least, Radhika.
Good evening and greetings. So I'm from India. So India has emerged as the third largest ecosystem for the startups globally as 31st May of 2023. How can capitalism help businesses make money while also caring for the people and the environment? For example, a company under capitalism could sell only eco-friendly products. Recently, there was a Shark Tank in our country that was shown about the reversible clothes. So, ma'am actually told about you need to buy clothes or phones in just a long span of time. So, how it is possible that how can capitalism help businesses make money while also caring for the people and environment? That's about my question.
Thank you so much. Kate, your final thoughts.
Woo, that's a lot. Radhika, your question is exactly my question. How can capitalism, given the design of capitalism, I'm not seeing that it is designed in a way that it can also care for people and planet. So I think it needs to be redesigned. That's exactly my challenge to it. And I think there are other forms of businesses, which is why I would have called this course The Future of Business, rather than the future of capitalism. I'm more interested in the future of business or the future of the economic design, rather than be already at the beginning stuck with the idea that it will be capitalism, because I think we need to go beyond those core traits. Taishi, I hope that the example I was bringing from Brussels, very small scale, but that when you bring, people do invest, people do choose to invest in things that have multiple forms of value. It's just, as we all know, it's incredibly hard to make those multiple forms of value visible and tangible over distance and to measure them. But when we are embedded in local communities, when we feel it in our own lives and can see it, and therefore we can measure it through lived experience, people are very willing to invest in it for far lower return. Francis, thank you for your challenging questions. I love this kind of debate. As an author, do I want to sell lots of books? Sure, but I want to sell the books because I want them to have an impact in the world. Actually, I took half of the money that every year now, I take half of the profits I make from the book and I put them back into the organization that I helped set up. And I've taken all the ideas from my book and put them in the commons, because I actually only wrote a book as a vehicle for advocacy. So the book was a really effective vehicle, but now I've put all the ideas into the commons, literally. The Doughnut is now a Creative Commons licensed tool. I've just shared online all of my lectures and resources because I can, and because I want to share them, because I want to have impact. So I'm using finance to drive impact. Let me say, the obvious thing, I can do that because I have enough, because I have sufficient, and many people in the world don't. And so because I have the privilege of having enough, I am free from pursuing more and more return and more profit and savings and growth. And I think this point you made about, is there enough? Well, I think it's really important to ask ourselves, how much is enough? Everybody may want to save for pension. Absolutely. Absolutely. Pension holders, as we know, though, are only a tiny proportion of capital markets. So we can't claim that all capital markets are in fact us. It's a tiny fraction of it. The vast majority of money in capital markets is the money of the super wealthy. And I think it's just really important to be aware of how extreme that high wealth is today. So let's not make a human shield out of pension holders, the innocent small individuals. But also investing in pensions, people need to know they have enough. And many pension holders say, I don't want to be invested in something if it's actually undermining the future for my grandchildren and the future. So they want to reflect multiple values in their pension. You did say this idea that we should all live within our means. It's not feasible. I want to put the opposite. If we live beyond our means, I believe that's what's not feasible. And that's what we see as humanity is currently, the richest and wealthiest people in humanity are currently living well beyond our means, and we are undermining the life support systems of this planet. To me, that's the not feasible. To me, that's what we owe Luis's 5-year-old daughter is to come back within. So it goes back to the psychology question that Sanjoy raised. How much is enough? What is sufficiency? And I'm asking this from one of the richest countries in the world. And I'm in a place where I absolutely should be asking it. Many of you may be in countries where many people really lack the bare minimum. But if we have a system that is based on an endless drive to accumulate, no matter how much we already have, the design is to accumulate more. That is what pushes us well beyond our means, tells us psychologically, I never have enough. And I think it's time that we recognize that some of us have enough. Some nations have more than enough resources to share amongst all their people. So I deeply believe there's a different part of humanity that can be activated if we create business designs that hold it, if we create finance that enables us to invest in it. I know I'm speaking about a very different world from the one that just got elected yesterday, but I stand with absolute determination and conviction to continue standing for that world. Donald Trump was elected for the first time a few months before my book was published. And the day I heard he was going to be elected, I thought, this book is pointless now. But then the next day I realized, actually, this is needed more than ever. We need compelling possible alternatives as much as when we face realities which I personally find devastatingly dangerous. So I stand with conviction in this. But as I started in this lecture, my aim here is to enable us to respectfully disagree, which I hope is what we're absolutely doing. So thank you very much for these questions and for all these questions and all the comments in the chat. I've massively enjoyed this session and unboxing capitalism with all of you today. Thank you.
Kate, Sandra, Arun, Olawale, thank you so much for your time, for your generosity. It has been an amazing session. It has been a sheer pleasure to share this space with you. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm afraid the time is up. Fernanda, I pass the mic to you for the wrap-up and closure.
Thank you so much. So many different sites, and my mind is exploding with all the discussions that we had. Thank you, Kate. Again, it's absolutely motivating to hear you and see how the donors economics evolves in time. I'm going to be very fast. I don't even need 5 minutes. So thank you again to everyone actually for staying here with us a little bit over time. And thank you, Professor Maciej, and thank you to all the contributors as well to this session. I will share again my screen, and again, it should be super fast. Let me just see how I can share it. Just a moment. Okay. Here it goes. Let me know if you can see my screen. Yep. Okay. Just a quick overview for the next session. I already spoke about it previously, so very fast. Next session, we're going to speak about what is a company and what is a manager. And we will revisit and going beyond the agency theory with Professor Tomonoda, again, the president and chair of the Shizenkan University, Japan, with the participation of Professor Jordi Canals from IESE, president of the Center for Corporate Governance. And that's it. That was a very quick wrap up. Just make sure you have the correct links for the sessions, that you show up with the correct dates. Some of the sessions are not happening exactly on Tuesdays, but one of them is happening on a Thursday. So just make sure you are aware of the dates. Again, if you have any other questions and if you would like to have more details about it, just write to your coordinators. I'm pretty sure that they can very easily and fast address the matters with us. And we will check with Kate if you can share the slides. This was very much raised by all the students here. And that's it. I'm thankful to all of you again. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye to everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
you. Bye.
Thank you for everybody.
Muchas gracias. Hasta luego.
Thank you.